U.S. Senator Tom Cotton. Here's our conversation. On my flight in, Hank Paulson was on the flight with me, and that got me to thinking about kind of where we are now, from the bailouts to the Tea Party to the election of Donald Trump. And I wonder how you reflect on how we've gotten to this point in our history.
Well, we've certainly all come a long way in 8 years. 8 years ago today, I was sitting in Afghanistan watching the inauguration of Barack Obama on Armed Forces Network. In some ways, Donald Trump and his election in November has been a reaction to some of the shortcomings of the Obama administration. We're in a long economic recovery now, but it's also the weakest economic recovery we've had since World War II. A lot of folks haven't seen a pay raise in decades, and a lot of people are still out of work. And then when you look around the world, I don't think there's any place where you'd say that America is stronger and more respected than it was 8 years ago. Donald Trump promised to fix those things, and you often see that in a transition of power at the presidential level. Is that people are looking for someone to kind of remedy some of the defects they see in the outgoing president.
A lot of people see kind of what happened as a rebuke of the Republican establishment and kind of a new direction for the Republican Party. Do you see it that way, or how does Donald Trump fit into, I guess, kind of traditional conservative norms?
Well, I'm not sure I'd call Donald Trump a traditional Republican, but I do think he highlighted some of the concerns that too many Republicans in Washington overlooked for many years, particularly on immigration. For too many years, I think people in Washington, when they think about immigration policy, have thought about the interests of foreigners, of people who are living in this country illegally or who are living overseas and want to come here. And while I feel for my fellow man, I serve my fellow citizen in Arkansas. We need an immigration policy that puts the interest of our citizens first. That's just one small example of how Donald Trump may be untraditional from a lot of Republican thinking in Washington, but I think he's right at the heart of where most Americans are.
The way that he talks has certainly scared some, maybe on the Democratic liberal side, but also some conservatives, some of your fellow colleagues in the Senate have been critical of the way that he takes to social media and that he's very outspoken, not traditional in that sense. Does that worry you in the way that he handles himself in those areas, or do you think that he, now that he's taken office, needs to change any of those ways?
I think too many of Donald Trump's critics in the media and among the Democrats in Washington focus on just one small slice. What he says. If you listen to what he said on election night, if you listen to what he said since then, he's focused very much on trying to be the president for all the people and unify the country.
We talk about priorities and a lot of things that you guys are trying to tackle all at once, especially now that you have majorities in the Senate and House. What 100 days, everybody talks about the 100-day plan. What can we expect, folks back at home in Arkansas expect from leaders here in Washington in the new administration?
Well, we have a lot of urgent priorities. I don't think that we can cram all those into 100 days, but just a few of the most immediate ones. We need to increase our military budget. They've seen 6 years of very dramatic cuts while the world has gotten more dangerous. We've got to fix the problems that Obamacare has made worse in our healthcare system to make sure people have access to quality, affordable care. We need to reform our tax code and our regulatory system so we can get the economy going at a rate that's creating new jobs and getting raises for working people. And then pretty soon after the inauguration, Donald Trump is going to announce his nominee to the Supreme Court. And I look forward to that announcement because it's time that we get the Supreme Court back in its traditional role of applying and interpreting the law, not creating law from whole cloth.
Already votes underway to start with a repeal of the Affordable Care Act, and the question is will there be a replacement at the same time of repeal? Your thoughts on what the new administration and Republicans in Congress need to do with that as far as repeal and then having something in place?
Well, they may not happen on the exact same day in the exact same bill. I wouldn't expect to see a 2,700-page Republican version of Obamacare because that's not our approach. We want to leave the decisions that are most intimate with people in their own hands, in the hands of their doctors and their loved ones. So I think you'll see maybe not one bill, but perhaps a series of bills after we repeal the core of Obamacare that solves a lot of the problems that existed well before Obamacare, but have continued and been worsened by Obamacare, like the inability of people with a pre-existing condition to get health insurance or increasing premiums and and deductibles or the narrowing of doctor networks. And the sooner that happens, the better. Now, that may be phased in over a period of time because we don't want to disrupt the marketplace. We don't want people to have the rug pulled out from underneath them. But the sooner that we can reach those solutions and vote on them and pass them into law, the better.
You talked about increased military spending, and we were looking at, you were talking, there's a big world behind us, and there's a lot of challenges in that big world. What do you see as what should we do with the increased spending and the increased might that we might have?
Well, all of our force services have taken it on the chin over the last 4 years. The Army and the Marine Corps in particular have seen their troop levels drop from the heights of the last decade. We need to build back those troop levels for the Army and Marine Corps. The Navy is down to fewer than 290 ships. We really need about 350 ships to secure our interest around the world. Likewise with the Air Force, we're flying aircraft now that have been around since the Korean War. So we need some big investments in the Navy and in the Air Force, and also in modernizing our nuclear forces. And we really need to rebuild troop levels in the Marine Corps and the Army.
What part of Asia is our biggest challenge? I think that's what everyone's talking about, whether it's way in the east in China and Russia, or in the west in the Middle East. What's your biggest concern?
It's hard to pin it down because we're a global power, and when you're a global power, you have global interest. We have huge trading partners and tens of thousands of troops in both Europe and East Asia. The Middle East remains vital to our interests because of access to oil, but also because that's the heart of the Islamic radicalism that threatens us here on our home shore. So when you're a global superpower, you can't simply look at one part of the world. You have to try to manage and protect your interests all around the world.
When it comes to Russia, obviously there's been a lot of focus on Donald Trump's statements and trying to, in his eyes, maybe build a path forward to a more positive relationship. In your eyes, is that possible under the current leadership there?
Well, it's nice to see Obama and some of the Democrats finally discover their inner Cold Warrior after 8 years of conciliating with Russia. For 8 years, though, Barack Obama has been turning the other cheek on Russian aggression, and that's one reason why Vladimir Putin felt emboldened enough to do something like to hack into the DNC or hack into Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman email. I think Donald Trump is a pretty seasoned and tough businessman and negotiator, and he recognized that you never give away something for free, and that in a relationship, every touch point is a point for more leverage and to advantage yourself. And that's what we need in our relationship with Vladimir Putin and Russia, someone who takes a firm line, who draws new boundaries, and who poses cost if you step over those boundaries. Donald Trump is going to be a traditional leader like that in a way that I think Barack Obama wasn't, not only in relation to Russia, but to most of our adversaries around the world.